I have booked in a couple of people for a podcast series. I quite fancy building a Hackintosh and seeing where we go with that. Say no to a gig where a promoter wants you to play for free. Would you recommend for a newcomer to start a radio/podcast show on SoundCloud, Mixcloud in 2019? What was the experience to DJ there and Ibiza in general? Have you ever explored into other electronic genres? Have we ever asked you what your first bit of music hardware was? I.O. has become the face of Mousetrap. I don't follow Deadmau5 on... Hey guys, welcome to the Kane audio vlog. It is Friday, it's time for another Ask Me Anything. Usual rules apply. Comment anything you want below this video and I'll get back to you in next week's video answering the questions. Before I look at last week's video, house admin, what have I been doing this week? What have I been doing? I've been working on my album actually. So I know I've said in a few videos I kind of had 20 tracks at one point, 30 tracks at another point. I've whittled it down to about 14 now. Of those 14, I think one of them was pretty much finished. Most of them were pretty much finished in terms of ideas, but not arranged out or, you know, needed extra instruments or bits and pieces. Now I'm at a point where I've got 14 and 3 of them are pretty much finished, and they kind of form the narrative that I've chosen. So all will be revealed in due course. So to give you an idea of timescale, I'm hoping to finish the album by the end of this year. We're now, middle of September. It gives me 3.5 months. That's not long, is it? But I should be okay, hopefully. I don't know. But with a view to releasing it then next year, I assume springtime, something like that. So there's time-ish. What else have I done this week? I have booked in a couple of people for a podcast series that I'm going to be doing on this YouTube channel. So hopefully I'll get a pilot in the next month and then up at some point. I'm not sure what to do yet. What I might do is offer it a week or 2 weeks in advance exclusively to Patreon subscribers, so everybody gets it for free at some point, but Patreon get priority. I think maybe that's a fair thing to do with the podcast thing, because, and I'm going to be completely transparent on this, I feel like I would be in a much better position to get better podcasts if there's a resource available to spend on making these podcasts, because they're going to cost me, well, it's already costing me a lot of money, especially as I'm having to fly to Amsterdam for it. But I think generally it's going to cost money to get these filmed and produced, and that's not including the time off I have to take to, you know, to edit and whatever. So I'm thinking maybe doing some sort of exclusive thing for Patreon subscribers, but hey, we'll see how it goes. On that note as well, I was actually thinking, so a lot of you guys have asked questions over a long period of time about doing a Hackintosh. I've noticed a lot of you guys in the Facebook group as well are talking about Hackintoshes. I keep mentioning I quite fancy building a Hackintosh and seeing where we go with that, and building one specifically for music production work and see how it goes. So on that note of Patreon, I'm kind of thinking, and I don't know what the score is here, I need to look into this, but you guys feel free to tell me if you know the answer, because that would help a lot. But I know that the way Patreon thing stands at the moment is like a monthly subscription. I don't know if you can do one-off payments and donations. I don't know what the score is there. I need to look into it. But what I was thinking is maybe having a Patreon package, if you will, that gets 100% used to purchase parts for the Hackintosh, and then putting together an exclusive Patreon video series on building the Hackintosh, going through what parts I'm choosing, why I'm choosing those, what possible issues there could be, and then of course the actual build in terms of hardware, and then putting together the software and, you know, finding all the resources and finding out what problems may or may not occur, what bits of hardware may or may not work, what bits of software may or may not work, because I know some people with Hackintoshes have issues with things like iMessage and whatever. So hopefully it kind of becomes a bit of an ongoing video series. It's just an idea. I literally had that idea a couple of days ago and thought, yeah, actually that might work. That might be a good way of doing it, because I've said to you guys before, I'm looking at upgrading my computer and everything. And I'm considering a Hackintosh, but I'm thinking that the safer way to go is iMac. But of course, because I've mentioned Hackintosh, obviously a lot of you guys are interested in doing that. So yeah, I was thinking maybe that's an idea of doing it, is if, for example, I can dedicate a section of Patreon stuff where 100% of that money goes on building Hackintosh, and we just see what kind of budget we get, I guess. So yeah, let me know your thoughts on that. If that works for you, then get in touch. I guess get in touch via Patreon is the best way for that. What else have we got? Oh, that's another thing. There's loads of house admin this week. What was I just reading? Oh, the Mousetrap London party. I did, in fact, put together the set from my Mousetrap London party. I did the opening set there last month, if you remember. I have now uploaded that set to Mixcloud. I'll drop a link below this video, but Mixcloud/Dom Kane. It's pretty easy to find. Yeah, and there it is in all its glory. And that, I think, is it for house admin. Do you know what? I've done pretty well with house admin this week. Normally I'm just umming and ahhing all the way through it. I actually mentioned stuff today. So, right, on to last week's video, which was, of course, number 69. Let's have a look. FanFan87. Summer, high five. Salut, Dom. Great to see some French colleagues here following you. In which case, salut, ça va? Thanks for your answer last week. I'm going to stop touchy questions for a moment, I promise. Also, great to see your mix on Mixcloud. There we go, just mentioned that. Last weekend, I had my very, very first DJ set in public in front of 250 people, and to be paid for this for the first time. Testing 3 tracks and didn't notice any bad crowd reaction, so lucky me. Well, double high fives for that, that's awesome. Looking for new gigs now, which gave me 2 questions for this week. 1. As a newcomer, is it good to achieve to say no to a gig where a promoter wants you to play for free? So I kind of struggle with this question, because I want to say never do gigs for free. But of course there is going to be exclusions to that, or exceptions to that even. So for example, I mean, obviously charity gigs, you know, it's for charity, fine. I would also say for very close personal friends, fair enough, do it for free. For a free event, yeah, I guess do it for free. Ish, maybe. Yeah, I suppose. But if the way I see it is, if a business was set up to sell a product, let's call it a shop. You open a shop, you're selling umbrellas, and you have to pay your rent, you have to pay whatever, and you need to hire, say, 3 members of staff in your amazing umbrella shop. Do you think it would be okay to go to those 3 members of staff and go, oh, we're not making much money this week, I'm not going to pay you, is that all right? You know, that's not how life works, so why should gigs be any different? You know, there are loads of promoters out there, I'm sure you guys have come across them, who go, oh, we didn't make much at the door tonight, or oh, it's only a small event, or oh, it's only this, that, or the other. And I think, well, if you're not making money, then you're not running a business properly. Also, I know in the UK, there are actually laws where you, as a promoter, are not allowed to put on an event that you are unable to pay for in advance. So if, for example, you book a DJ that's £10,000 and you're selling tickets on the door and blah, 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 you need to be able to pay that 10 grand, whether you sold 1 ticket or 100,000 tickets or whatever. You have to be able to afford that. Now, I don't think anyone ever follows that law, and enforcing it is an entirely different thing. But I think the point stands that actually that's how you should run a business. So it's not about should we accept gigs for free. The question isn't about us as DJs, should we be playing for free? Because the answer is inherently no. The question is, should promoters be not paying their staff? And I think that changes the perspective of the question. And should promoters be not paying their staff? You know, should promoters be getting door staff and going, oh, we didn't make much tonight, not paying you? Personally, I don't think that's how it should work. That's not, you know, it's not a job then, is it? You're just volunteering. And I don't think, you know, if you're the person providing the entertainment, which for a lot of events is the sole reason people are going there, I'm not saying you should be the highest paid person, but you should be up there somewhere. So there's that to bear in mind. However, then it gets even more complicated, because what about the gigs that absolutely benefit you? So let's say, for example, you were offered a gig that was going to be a front page feature for 3 music magazines that other promoters around the world are going to read, and they're going to see your face on the front cover of this magazine or whatever, you know, so you're getting genuine, legitimate exposure. Then I guess, you know, if for whatever reason the people running this event are unable to pay you, then, you know, that's a judgment call. So I guess it comes down to common sense then. So yeah, there we go. I would say, but in conclusion to that question, before I just rant forever, in conclusion, I would say generally try not to do gigs for free. I think they're not healthy. I don't think they're good for anyone, let alone yourself. Even if you can afford it yourself and you're happy to play for free, it's not about you being happy to play for free. It's about, should that promoter just not pay any of their staff? Should a business not pay their staff? Well, it's not a very good business if they're not paying their staff. So that's how I see it. Even if they're paying you minimum wage, a gesture is better than nothing. You know, I've had gigs before in some fairly serious clubs where I got paid 50 quid, something like that. And they wanted me to play for free, but I'll kick off and go, no, hang on, you got to give me something. This is a transaction. I'm giving you a service. You have to give me a payment. And in which case they've thrown 50 quid. And don't get me wrong, these are gigs that have been good for me because I'm in the area that night. I'm already maybe doing another gig down the road or something, and so I've got to hang around for trains or buses or planes or whatever. So, it works for me. But the point is you. I think you should always just go, you know what? Actually, no. Pay me 20 quid, whatever my bus fare is, whatever it cost me to get to this gig. You need to be paying me something, just as a goodwill gesture. So there we go. Question 2. Would you recommend for a newcomer to start a radio/podcast show on SoundCloud, Mixcloud in 2019? Or is it too late to create an audience by this way? So that's kind of what led me to my first ever international gigs. Now, don't get me wrong, it was a different time, and I was on Proton Radio in the very, very beginning, so thousands of people tuned in to those shows because it was really the only online station at the time that was running good progressive house. So that meant promoters from around the world were listening in to what DJs were playing what and whatever. These days, it's not as easy as that, but I do think it's worth running. If you can do a weekly radio show or fortnightly, monthly, whatever, I think weekly's probably better if you're looking to build an audience. I've said about these videos and building this YouTube channel, similar rules apply in a weird way, in that if I want to build an audience on this YouTube channel, I should be uploading 3 or 4 times a week, because that's what YouTube likes to promote in its algorithms, is regular content. So these once a week AMAs and the odd bit here and there, which I really should do more of, and I do plan on doing it. It's just life has got over me at the moment. That's what I should be doing. But I'm fortunate enough that I don't make any money from these videos. I take pretty much my whole Friday off doing these AMAs. Making the other videos takes more time, really, because I have to plan them, I have to write them out, I have to put them all together, and there's a lot more editing work. But the point being is that if I wanted to really build the audience, I need to be putting out regular stuff. So if you're going to be doing a radio show or podcast, it's tricky, but I would say you want to try and aim for doing weekly if building an audience is your goal. It's not too late to do that, but I do think it's probably harder in 2019 than it was in, say, 2009 or 1999. I don't know. I don't think SoundCloud is the way forward, because they seem to be putting down a lot of copyright strikes. Also, Mixcloud, what the hell's going on with Mixcloud? Can someone fill me in? I've missed a chunk of Mixcloud's history, I think. As you can probably see, for anyone that's gone to my Mixcloud when I mentioned uploading the Mousetrap mix, that's the first mix I've uploaded there for probably a year, I guess. And yeah, I've noticed that loads of stuff is now paid for, and to listen to the rest of this show, you need to cough up money. I don't get that. Whatever. Anyway, so SoundCloud, Mixcloud, I don't know. SoundCloud is really pushing their pro stuff at the moment. I know that they cap upload limits and time limits and viewer limits and all sorts of crap. So I would say not SoundCloud. Mixcloud, I don't know anymore, so maybe that would work. Otherwise, I guess you're better off doing it as a podcast. And if you're going to pay for anything like Mixcloud or whatever, in my view, I pay for a server, which is where my podcast and anyone listening to this show as a podcast on Spotify or iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts, I pay for a server. I pay a monthly fee. It's not much, but I do pay for a server so that I can upload the MP3s and you guys hopefully get a good download speed when you're downloading it. And I think that's more worthwhile because I've got loads of storage. I've got terabytes of storage then, so I can just keep uploading loads of content. I don't have to delete the old content. SoundCloud, I know that I refuse to have a pro account on SoundCloud, just because they fiddled their prices one year. I used to have one. They fiddled their prices and there was basically no advantage to it. So I thought, well, why would I do that? So I know I'm pretty close to having the upload limit reached already on that. So I'm definitely not a fan of SoundCloud. There we go. Yanis Lunkmelis. Hi Dom. A couple of weeks ago I was in some clubs in Ibiza, including Club High, which previously was Space, where you had a residency. I've always wanted to ask, what was the experience to DJ there and Ibiza in general? Summer is over. Sad face. Yeah. Man, Ibiza, Space. I mean, I was fortunate enough that I was playing We Love Sundays at Space, which was just one of the greatest nights ever. The sound system in Space was, I think, the best sound system in the world at the time, certainly that I was playing on. It was just an incredible quality sound. And of course the crowd there was legendary because it was Space and because everybody going there, all the Italians, the Spanish, the Brits, everybody was going to Ibiza to go to Space. So everybody was walking into Space knowing that they were going to have the time of their life. So everyone was just peak happy. Yeah, I can't even begin to explain. Don't get me wrong, I never played the main terrace or anything. You know, I was in the dingy room inside. But even still, it was just an incredible experience. And even afterwards, coming out of that room and then into the terrace, and you know, catching up with people like Leo and Bushwhacker, or James Zabila or Nick Van Tuley, because they were all the We Love residents in the main terrace, and Paul Wolford. You know, and watching those guys play to just a sea of hypnotized people. Yeah, I don't think it's anything you can really put to words, to be honest. Just hell of an experience. So, and there were so many times when I sort of be out there and even the next day, you know, I remember a mate of mine, Jem Haynes, who was also resident there. I remember there was the next day after a gig, we were sat on the beach and we were just killing time because we had a couple of hours till our flight back to London, and we just sat on a beach in Ibiza looking at each other thinking, what a life. You know, this is a job. Having just DJ'd in one of the world's most amazing clubs and had pretty much the best night of our life, and then sat on a beach drinking a beer waiting for our aeroplane. I mean, I don't even know how to explain how amazing the whole experience is, and I think for pretty much anyone going to Ibiza now as a customer, as a you know, a clubber, it's still a pretty spectacular experience. You know, I think the first time I went to Ibiza was late 90s. Was it 97? 1997, maybe 98. I think it was 97. You know, and again back then it was still just a spectacular experience, and it just you know, there was a lot of politics that happened. There was things like San Antonio kind of went downhill and whatever, but even still, it was still one of the greatest places you could ever go clubbing. Nowadays I'm not sure, if I'm honest. I think if you're into that scene, it's probably still a great place to go. But for me personally, I'm not a clubber anymore. I'm too old and too ugly and too tired for all of that. But I still love the performance side, and I'm fairly sure performing there is still a similar experience. And I've heard great things about High, so I don't know how close it was to being like Space. I think Space had a perfect combination, and it was a lucky perfect combination of engineers that worked on the sound system. The engineers there, I remember going there one in the daytime and seeing the engineers tuning the sound system, which they did every day, week, I don't know. They were full time anyway. You know, and that's rare that you go to a club where you've got full-time employed engineers tuning the sound system and making sure everything is immaculate. And like I say, the combination of those and the club owners and the club promoters and the nights and the DJs and the residents and, of course, the people that come to the club, the whole combination of everything, I don't think that's ever really going to be replicated, or not for me anyway. Maybe for a different generation with different tastes, there'll be a different combination. So yeah, there we go. That's that. Florian Kettenbach. Is it Bach or Bach? Or Bach? Bach. I'm going to say Bach. Florian Kettenbach. Summer, high five. Hey Dom, since I got to know you not long ago, I don't know if this kind of question was already asked. It's okay either way. Have you ever explored into other electronic genres, or have you always had your present style? Actually, I'm going to read the rest of your question, and then I'm going to hit reset on the camera because I can see that time's coming up. I listen to pretty much everything, also non-electronic genres, and I'm also deeply into dubstep. I would like to hear your thoughts on dubstep and other heavier electronic genres. Do you like it, or are you joining Deadmau5, who says it is a fuck you to every audio engineer? Thanks for answering my question. And I'm going to reset the camera. Okay. Okay, right. So, have you ever explored into other electronic genres, or have you always had your present style? I have always ventured into everything and anything. I've written jazz music, I've written classical music, I've written film score music. None of this has ever gone out to the public. This is just for my own personal, I don't know, learning, I suppose. Yeah, so I love all sorts of music. So it's definitely not just electronic. And I've also recorded with bands. I've recorded opera singers and engineered for vocalists in that sort of area as well. So I've done a fair bit. I listen to pretty much everything, also non-electronic genres, and deeply into dubstep. I would also like to hear your thoughts on dubstep and other heavier electronic genres. So I think I've mentioned this before. I actually don't listen to much EDM on my own at home. It's not what I tend to listen to the most, or in the car or travelling or whatever. I probably listen to more reggae and dub than anything. So dubstep is kind of a sidestep to that. I'm not a massive fan of dubstep. I know that when the whole bro step thing took off, I loved that because I thought it was new, it was fresh, it was exciting, and I kind of get what Deadmau5 is on about with the fuck you to audio engineers. But actually, I think there are some dubstep DJs that are also able to say hello to audio engineers. You know, if you look at Funkcase, for example, so you know, he barely uses a compressor in his music. You know, the clarity is pristine. So, and he writes the most aggressive, horrific dubstep going. You know, and it's fantastic to hear that clarity and presence in his tracks as well. So, so I don't agree with Deadmau5 when it comes to that. If that's what he means, I don't know. I've never heard him say that. I don't follow Deadmau5 on stuff. I follow him on, I think I follow him on Twitter, but I don't check Twitter much. I know I like his page on Facebook, but I don't think he posts stuff on Facebook. Outside of that, I really don't actually get that much information from what Deadmau5 says. Everything I ever hear Deadmau5 saying is usually second-hand or third-hand. Like, for example, you saying it's a fuck you to every audio engineer. I don't know if that's a direct quote or if that's exactly what he means or whatever. But anyway, taking that for its face value, I kind of disagree with it because I think actually it can be really well engineered dubstep if it's done properly. So when the whole bro step thing took off, and for me, I think that was down to Skrillex and Deadmau5, and I loved it, absolutely loved it. It was amazing. Like I say, it was fresh, it was new, it was exciting. It kind of was a fuck you to audio engineers, but a good fuck you. It was like a sort of fuck the rules, fight the system type fuck you, and that's a good thing for me. Yeah, so I definitely liked dubstep then. However, after maybe 6 months or a year of that, I kind of felt like it wasn't fresh and exciting anymore. It was a bit repetitive for me. And I've not really listened to much since. I've heard the odd dubstep track. I don't think I could ever sit down and listen to an hour of dubstep necessarily, let alone a whole night of dubstep. So it's not necessarily my thing, because I like things to be a bit more musical, I guess, which is why I like the reggae and dub, is because, if you look at a band like Alba Rosie, for example, there's huge sub bass, but it's acoustic instruments mixed with electronic, with vocals and everything on top, and so it's kind of got that dub swagger, but at the same time there's more reggae influence, I suppose. So yeah, there we go. So that's kind of I'm fine with heavier electronic genres. I'm a big fan of Noisia, so in the drum and bass side of stuff, I'm a huge fan of Noisia and Dub Physics, who is local to here apparently, which would be great to meet up with him at some point, because he's done some absolute bangers of tracks. So yeah, there we go. That's my opinion on all of that. Deadly Custard, Summer, high five. Hey Dom, have we ever asked you what your first bit of music hardware was? And were you ever creating music entirely on hardware, i.e. no DAW? I don't think you've ever asked it, but interestingly, I did an interview with a company yesterday and was talking about this. First bit of hardware. I think, well, so it's really hard to define hardware here, because we were, as a family, we were poor as fuck, but for some reason we managed to get a computer for the family, which I remember at the time was like this super expensive thing. For all I know, it could have been a piece of shit by whatever standards there was back then. It could also have been some sort of educational grant type thing. I've never really thought about it, but yeah, I'm not sure how we managed to get that. But whatever, we had a family computer. It was pre-Windows 95, so we're looking at like MS-DOS. It was pre-1995, so it's bound to be pre-Windows 95. Yeah, so it was running MS-DOS, and you'd key in some commands. There was a floppy disk that came with the computer, and I was saying yesterday, I forget the name, I think it was called something like Presto Arranger, which was like a super stripped back MS-DOS version of what we would now call piano roll. And you would just key in the notes and the timing and the spaces, and that was it, and it would kind of play a 8-bit piano type thing. Then I remember around a similar time I borrowed a 4-track tape recorder from school, and I would get mates to play guitar or drums or whatever and record it on a single microphone in a single track. And we'd just muck around with a 4-track tape recorder, and I remember learning to bounce 3 tracks. If you got 3 tracks on your 3 of your 4 tracks filled with audio, you could then play those 3 and hit record on the 4th, and basically bounce those 3 channels down to a mix or a bus onto your 4th track, and then you free up the other 3 channels, so then you can add in more channels. So using a 4-track recorder, you could record, say, 16 or whatever instruments, and I remember learning to do stuff like that. So that wasn't mine. There's no way I could have afforded one, or not at that point in my life. I was probably 13, 14 at the time. So is that my first bit of hardware? It's one of the first bits I remember using. I also, I know I've definitely mentioned this on my channel before. My English teacher in high school, I'm sure his name was John Davis, and if he's out there, please get in touch because I would love to thank him. He's the guy who got me into Laurent Garnier and gave me Laurent Garnier's album, which weirdly ties into he was playing in Space in Ibiza when I was playing as well, which is all very full circle. John Davis, the English teacher, would, on I think a Tuesday in school at lunchtime, he would go to the computer room and he would offer anyone who wanted kind of a music tech lessons, because there was a keyboard in the music room, and he'd get that and take it to the computer room, and there was an Atari 2600, and so we kind of learnt how to do MIDI tracking and stuff like that on the Atari. So again, that was probably my first real go at music production. Again, it wasn't my hardware, it's other people's hardware. So again, I don't really know if that's my first bit of hardware, but I think I've kind of answered your question there. Were you ever creating music entirely on hardware, i.e. no DAW? Yes, using the 4-tracker. Yeah, using the 4-tracker. We had... I think it was a Roland 606 or something, doing drums on that, and that was basically the click track, and that would be your track 1, and then on top of that you'd be playing other instruments and whatever, and keyboards, or just messing around. We're only kids. Yeah, so that was that. Yeah, so moving on. Raphael Summer, yes, Dom, you kind of answered. Just to be clear about bootlegs, it's just for learning purposes only. I was curious. So this was last week. You asked, is it worthwhile, I guess, making bootlegs as a, so now you're clarifying, as a learning purpose. Since at some point I saw this tip thanks to Layback Luke in some blog, the aim idea is to match the sound versus already pro-mixed tunes. Other producers suggested this too, I believe. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. I think if you've never done that and you're okay, then I don't think it's essential, is what I'm saying. So if you do it and you enjoy it, great. If you don't, I don't think you're missing anything. I don't think anybody needs to do that. Did I do that? I mean, like I've said last week, I have done bootlegs, but I don't think I've ever done it specifically to learn. I think it's always a good idea to try and copy other people's music privately. If there's a track that you like out there, you know, just try and recreate it, you know, kick for kick, snare for snare, bass for bass. Just try and recreate it as best you can, because I think that teaches you a lot about sound design and mixing and mastering and everything, and just see how close you can get it to the original. Obviously don't release it because it's copyright, but I think it's good practice to do stuff like that. So maybe that's even better than bootlegs. I don't know. When it comes to do it myself, some classics I love so much that should never be touched. I 100% agree with you there. There are definitely a lot of tracks out there that people have destroyed. I used to really try to make one just for fun too, or because I didn't find any version or club version that fits my vibe. Again, I think that's a good reason to do it, and that's the reason I did it. Was, you know, if you look at, for example, I did Mori Kanta Yeke Yeke, which I think is on my SoundCloud. I was careful with that. I didn't want to go, hey, this is me pushing my talents or anything like that. I just felt like the track was lacking a little bit in low end, and it didn't quite fit in my sets. I only had it to play at the very end of my gigs to like close a festival or whatever as a big classic moment. So I think I updated the kicks, added in a couple of hi-hats, some additional bass work. I think I probably edited a few bits in the arrangement, extended and cut a few bits here and there, but really kind of left it as original as I could, because the original is awesome. So there we go. That's it, Dom. Thanks again. Have an amazing week. You are welcome. Sorry for my terrible English. It's not terrible, so there we go. And last one, Zombo. Nice video, Dom. Question. Is it me, or IO has become the face of Mousetrap. He's constantly on the Mousetrap Instagram. Is it going to be like that all the time, or is another artist going to take his place sooner or later? Have a nice weekend. I don't hate IO, it's just something I notice. And I can see FanFan87 has replied saying, saw that too. His communication on Twitter and Instagram are very different from any Mousetrap artist. Even Atlas by the time. But he's managed the agency behind Armada and putting him on Mousetrap and Juno Beats and Armada for releases and bookings. So yeah, that can explain the story a bit. Oh, so I'm guessing he's managed by the agency behind Armada. Okay, didn't know that. Yeah, so I've also noticed IO is the face of Mousetrap. I don't have a problem with that at all. I don't know. I don't really have an opinion on that, if I'm honest. Is it going to be like that all the time? I doubt it. I'm guessing, people come and go and they move on and do bigger and better or whatever. If you look at any given time, I think Mousetrap have always had somebody that's big and being pushed, and usually for good reason. So I think that's just part and parcel of a big label like that. And I think when somebody is new and exciting and young and fresh and all of these things, then it's a good package to sell for a record label that is a business. I think it's a good, it's an easy package to sell, if I'm honest. And I mean that in a good way. So it's no surprise. I would imagine that at some point, what generally happens, I can't speak for IO or Mousetrap because I'm not either, but I should imagine what normally happens with these situations is the artist usually either outgrows the label or drops a big bomb of an album or whatever, and then starts a big tour of their own, and they become the headline artist of events. So, at the moment, for example, you'll see IO, I'm guessing, again, I haven't looked, but I'm assuming he's probably supporting Deadmau5 on a load of shows, or at least test pilot. And I would imagine at some point his name becomes so heavily associated and grows through doing more gigs and getting more and more exposure. What usually happens is then he will become the headline artist of other events and probably have his own show with his own lights and staging and whatever, and he'll be the main act, and then someone comes in below him and supports him throughout whatever, someone newer, younger, fresher, whatever. And that's kind of how the music industry works, really. It's certainly not exclusive to Mousetrap. That's every label ever, or certainly every... I've got to be careful there because it's not really a label specific thing. It's more of an event thing. But Mousetrap do both label and events, so it kind of crosses over. But I don't think it has any impact on us other artists on the label, or not that I've noticed. I don't think anything's changed from my perspective. I'm still happily trundling along doing my thing. I'm still doing my album. I'm still hoping to get an EP out at the end of this year if I can. It's probably too late for me to even pitch it now for the end of this year, but I'd like to at least have it signed and a release date set by the end of the year. So I don't think it shouldn't be a shock to us that that's going on. I think it's just that's the way it goes. And like I say, as a label or an events company, you want one of your artists to become this huge big deal and to be the face of the company, because then you can use that as a product to bring in a new product underneath, and it becomes a big self-fulfilling prophecy. So it's all good as far as I'm aware. So then you've said, or is another artist going to take his place sooner or later? I should imagine, like I say, often what happens is the artist either outgrows the events or the label or whatever and moves on to something else. So if you look at Skrillex, for example, Skrillex got signed to Mousetrap, put out the EP, became huge, And then off the back of that got signed to majors and went off and did his own shows, became the headline act. I think he was a support act for Deadmau5 for a while, and then became the headline act of his own on doing his own shows. And then I guess, you know, other people, again, I don't follow the industry or scene enough to know this, but I assume someone then became the big thing, supporting Skrillex and being the face of whatever Skrillex's label was or is, I don't know. And then they would have gone off and done their own thing and set up their own label. It's all big thing. It's a big cycle of stuff that goes on. That's basically how record labels and management and events and whatever else works. And it seems to work very well for a lot of people. So yeah, it's all good. It's just, it's not something I've ever got into. I've never had proper big management. I've never really had a fixed plan. I've never had a manager who's tapping on shoulders going, you need to get him into this gig, this gig, this gig. I've always just kind of taken things as they hit me, but I've been very lucky that I've had a successful career from just doing what I want when I want. So yeah, I got a pretty good life, to be fair. There we go, my friends. That is it for this week. If you have made it this far into the video, especially as I've just spent the last, I don't know how long, just waffling, then you do deserve a medal. Prove that you have made it this far in by commenting the word plastic, because Joe Rogan reacts to plastic surgery disasters. Oh damn, I'm gonna open that up in a new tab. Damn you, YouTube algorithms, you pulled me in with your clickbait. Oh, and there we go, I need to finish mixing this track as well. Right, thank you very much for listening and watching and whatever it is you do. I hope you all have a good weekend, and I will see you same time next week. Cheers.